So that's what we're offering to you. That's the main focus of this. But we also recognize that if we're going to produce students who are emotionally healthy, we also have to do something with our teachers in the teachers' colleges. And Faith has been leading a program, and I'm going to ask Faith to just share with you for a few minutes on the art and science of happiness.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We pioneered a course that started at Michael Teachers College, Michael University College, on the art and science of happiness, in which we help the students to move from where they are, especially if they have emotional instability, and to become happier. So we do things like forgiveness, changing negative thoughts to positive, understanding what it is to be happy, and that means not just having a set of pleasant circumstances, but also a change in attitude. So we focus a lot on attitude. So it is basically a 6-week course on positive psychology. This is with the teachers to be. And what we have found is that there is so much pain in persons who are going to become teachers. And you would know a lot about that too. At St. Andrew High School, Mrs. Reed invited me on one occasion to talk to the student body, to just speak, address them about unhappiness. And that went very well. And we've also done something at Camperdown High School, where we have addressed the staff on the art and science of happiness, just a 2-hour presentation at Camperdown High School. So that is also a tool that can be used at your schools. Thank you.
We believe in being proactive, and that's why even though you're busy people, and even though the time was short, we chose to invite you here today. And we are going to ask you to give us a response. There's a pink slip there, a good pink slip. It's really a generic pink slip. You can write on it how you'd like to be involved with us. We are now setting up the schedule for assessment in July and August of this year. We believe that it should be done before the child comes to school. That before you meet the child, you get a profile as to what the child, the emotional profile of the child. In my absence, and even during the summer and so forth, Sharon McCarthy is going to be helping us with that, and I want Sharon to take a stand right where she is right now. So Sharon will lead the team that will do the follow-up, setting the schedule, and so forth. So we say to you, be involved. One word about the book. Books are still available. If your school does not have the books as yet, we regret that you do not have it as yet, and you can change that today. You can place the orders here and pay later. The Ministry of Education has bought some copies, and I believe that they have sent to many schools, and they are interested in. There is still another order to be filled that we hope will get out, that they'll fill soon to get out to the rest of the schools. We want to help people live. We want to be proactive and to join you in helping those students where you are at. Faith will introduce the minister now.
Thank you very much. Our distinguished guest speaker is a proud graduate of St. George's College, where he also taught briefly in the 1960s, prior to and after graduating from Cornell University in 1967 with a degree in history. He was a 1968 Rhodes Scholar to Oxford University, where he studied jurisprudence and was called to the bar in England in 1970. He was a lecturer in the Department of Social Work and also a research fellow in the Faculty of Law at the University of the West Indies. As you know, he has hosted a number of radio and television public affairs programs. He is an ordained deacon of the Roman Catholic Church and also the Member of Parliament for Central Kingston. He is married and has the perfect number of children, 7. Please welcome the Minister of Education, the Honorable Ronald Thwaites.
Dear friends, friends of the children, friends of life, thank you for this opportunity to share this with you this morning. Mr. Lee, I too have read the book. And I had the privilege, before being encumbered with present responsibilities, to host a program with Choose Life, when we could go through many of the issues and interview persons. I must tell you all that Mr. Lee's story this morning touched my heart. I'm sure it did for everyone, yes. And at first I grumbled him a little because he seemed to be going on for long. And then when I heard the story, I understood why he had to and why this was a moment of grace. So many issues have been touched. Latterly, the reference was made to the pain that many teachers have in their own lives. Recently, as I'm learning this new work, I've come across the situation of an analysis done. I don't think, I'm not going to say by whom, but where so many teachers, in this case, not to exclude the men, but this was for women teachers, how many of them revealed histories of sexual abuse. And they come into the profession with some baggage that is encumbering them, particularly in their relationship with boys. And of course, you can understand how that would just perpetuate a problem. And that would be just one small prism of insight into the difficulty. I'm an inner city MP, and the issue of suicide, of course, is the end of the road, as we've said. But we are faced with a general problem of a dysfunctional order coming into our schools, and it is one of the inhibitors of positive outcomes. And in fact, my 6 weeks in cursus into the Ministry of Education has filled me with awe at the way in which understaffed sometimes and under-resourced schools deal so well with some extraordinary negatives with which the students come, of an economic source, indeed of an emotional and psychiatric source, and of shared social deficits. Yes? Nothing is coincidence, we know. But just last weekend, I had two experiences that come back to me this morning. I met on one of the lanes in downtown a 14-year-old girl who was being denounced in the most traduced, in the most abusive language by her mother publicly on the street corner. And her sin was that it was the time of her menstruation, and she had used more than 4 squares of toilet paper. And what she was being accused of and her anatomy being described, when that girl goes back to your high school, yes, on Monday morning, how do you deal with that? How does she deal with her self-image? On Sunday night, I was at a church in Franklin Town preaching, and I heard a huge commotion, a child being beaten nearby across the gully. And I inquired and went over. And indeed, the mother she introduced me as to whether I was the father of the child and what I should do with myself and where I should go, which is okay. But her real anger was that the boy, perhaps 12 or 13 years old, merasmic for his age, had taken some of the food. He was hungry, and he had taken some of the food that was put down for the next morning. Again, when he goes to school, yes, what happens? What do you do? And what is the outcome of that limpid and impressive 2030 vision that we have for our children, for our people, when we are facing this kind of social dysfunction? social in its widest sense. I have a question to ask of you. Should we not take the first term of a school for entering students, transfer students, and almost suspend the classes and just make sure that we use that period for diagnosis and for coming to terms with emotional intelligence, with physical incapacities, with educational deficiencies, that we engage ourselves entirely that, so that we know the product that we have to deal with at school. We try to link with the affective parent, if parent there is, to know whether there is a place to do homework, indeed a place to sleep, the likelihood of whether the child is going to have food, how far he or she is coming from, can they read, at what level, all of these things which we used to take for granted. If Mr. Lee is, or was it? No, it was Mr. Gentleman from Arden, Reverend Ellis, distancing himself from Mrs. Reed's generation. How much more do I have to distance myself? I graduated from St. George's in 1959. But just coming to grips with those things, would that be a useful thing? And if the first term is too valuable, could we even say that for doing these things, do we not insist? Will you tell me on using the summer? Yes, in order to do this and do it well. Is the child on PATH program? Is PATH programming work? I visited a country school yesterday, one of those schools which was disgracefully and unnecessarily labeled as being a failure. Yes? God made no failures. Yes? But when I went to that school, built for 200 students, accommodating 840, 550 of whom are on PATH. And then I come to the ministry. Let me cry on your shoulders a little. And the allocation for you know better than I, the allocation for food at school for the PATH students, which is only 3 days a week, I'm finding out. Yes, and it's probably $42 a day. What nonsense is that? Yes. No cry about IMF, about debt levels, about fiscal rectitude can justify that kind of stab in the heart for the future of our country, and more so, the future of each of those individual students who we are treating in this way. So I'm asking for a coalition out of this breakfast meeting and out of centered around Choose Life. I'm asking for a coalition of strong voices, yes, who are going to say, don't give us straw basket to carry water, please. Please, these are the minimum things that we as school principals, as guidance counselors need in order to be able to provide the kind of outcomes which will justify the huge investment, the biggest investment that the people of Jamaica make every year in the upliftment of education. Start a movement, please. Yes, a movement in defense of the children. And yes, it's important that we get the curriculum right. And yes, it's important that we have the infrastructure of buildings and laboratories and libraries and computers in place. But please, the mental health, the spiritual condition of our children is the prerequisite for any of those things making any sense. We've spoken about the teachers, but I'd like to say that going forward, continuing professional development of our teachers is not an option. It is going to be a requirement for licensing, for tenure, and for advancement. And we can't afford to, in our pursuit of individual needs and sometimes selfish needs to forego the kind of requirements that we have. whether it's minister or it's ancillary staff, it really doesn't matter. This minister won't have, as he normally doesn't, any holiday this year. I'm going back to the university to learn something more about the portfolio, which haplessly I'm in charge of. I need to know much more about educational philosophy than I do now. And it's going to be true of our teachers. They're continuing professional development, especially in these areas covered by your emotional intelligence assessment, and other related things are going to be critical. Ms. Fern, I'm your Queen's Counsel this morning, but we have to increase the number of, the training of, and the regard for the guidance counselors in schools. Otherwise, all the other things that we're seeking to do may be overtaken by that deficit. Indeed, it is to understand the times. I wish to say in conclusion that the previous administration did considerable work in developing a parenting policy, and the legislation is almost complete, and there is a whole tissue of material that is going to be available to the nation, and hopefully particularly for the schools, which will give us some tools for encouraging better parenting. I am fully sensitive to the fact that passing a law will not cause people to be better parents, but laws are supposed to, anyway, set some standards. And we hope that this is something that we can look forward to this year, and will also follow the setting up of a parenting commission. And again, I challenge you, Dr. and Mrs. Thomas, that you need to be fully involved in helping us to work out that policy so that we do not have these inherited deficits coming higher up in our school system and in the growth of our people. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it seems to me that, bearing in mind the society that we live in, its challenges and its huge opportunities, it is very important that we have the correct focus. And I believe, I submit myself to your own judgment, that the sooner we identify the challenges, the pathologies, the great talents of our children, the easier it is to deal with them properly, to rectify them where possible, to channel them where necessary. And that is why almost a mantra of this new administration is that we must do it right the first time. And there's an unapologetic emphasis being placed, to be placed in the future too, on early childhood education, because we believe that if we are meticulous and careful about that, then we will be able to allay many of these difficulties that apply and emerge later on, when it is so difficult for them to be curbed, and when the outcomes are so often as tragic as Choose Life has found out. I recognize fully that this involves a broader question of societal change. It's much more than our educational culture. And the means by which you move a society's values and attitudes is a very difficult process. I have some ideas as to how we can do this, but it is obviously a process which will take a lot of time and a lot of grace. In the meantime, we must do what we can. And what we can do is to, as I said, hopefully create a movement around this concern for life. I'm always entranced at those who choose life in terms of preserving the life of the unborn. I, of course, espouse that unequivocally. But it's no use preserving the life of the unborn or of the terminally ill when in between you don't take care of them as well. And that has to be a political task, a pedagogic task, and more than anything else, an affair of the heart. Thank you very much.